Sarah Mitchell had always been the kind of woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders without showing a single crack in her armor. Growing up in the small coastal town of Newport, Rhode Island, she had learned early on that showing weakness wasn't an option, especially after the tragic boating accident that claimed her parents' lives when she was just 22. The accident left her as the sole guardian of her younger brother, Ethan, a frail 19-year-old whose congenital heart condition required expensive ongoing medical treatments. The inheritance from their parents had quickly evaporated into medical bills and college loans, forcing Sarah to abandon her dreams of becoming an architect to take whatever jobs could help keep their heads above water. "I promise I'll make this better," she would whisper to Ethan late at night when she thought he was asleep. But he always heard her, his eyes remaining closed to spare her the burden of his worry. By her 28th birthday, Sarah had secured a position as a server at the Meridian, one of Newport's most exclusive waterfront restaurants. It catered to the elite summer residents, the yacht owners, the Wall Street executives, the tech billionaires who came to escape the heat in their sprawling mansions overlooking the Atlantic. The Meridian was where old money met new, where deals were made over $500 bottles of wine, where Sarah moved silently between tables, offering perfect service while remaining invisible to those she served. "Sarah, table 12 needs the 09 Bordeaux, not the 10, Marcus," the head sommelier hissed as she passed by with a tray of appetizers. "I know, Marcus," she replied, her voice remaining pleasant despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. "I'll handle it after I deliver these." The summer season was in full swing, which meant 14-hour shifts, feet that never stopped aching, and tips that would need to stretch through the leaner winter months. But the money was good, better than anywhere else in town, and Sarah needed every cent for Ethan's upcoming surgery. Tonight was particularly busy. A private event occupied the upper floor of the restaurant, some tech mogul's birthday celebration. The staff had been briefed earlier. Absolute discretion, absolute perfection. The owner himself had come down to oversee the preparations, something that happened rarely enough to set everyone on edge. Gabriel Blackwood, the reclusive owner of the Meridian, was something of an enigma in Newport. Despite owning one of the town's premier establishments, he rarely made public appearances. Rumor had it he'd made his fortune in Silicon Valley before buying several high-end restaurants across the country. What little Sarah knew about him came from whispers among the staff. He was exacting, distant, brilliant, and impossible to please. She had seen him precisely 3 times in the 2 years she'd worked at the Meridian. Each time, he had moved through the restaurant like a shadow, observing, everything speaking to no one. His presence alone was enough to make the entire staff stand straighter, move faster, check every detail twice. At the end of her shift, Sarah counted her tips with shaking hands in the employee locker room. It was a good night, nearly $400, but still not enough. Ethan's medication had gone up again, and the insurance was fighting the coverage for his next procedure. As she slipped the cash into her wallet, her phone buzzed with a text from her brother. "Don't worry about dinner. Took my meds. How's work?" She smiled, typing back, "Busy. Be home soon. Don't wait up." What Sarah didn't know was that while she had been serving the wealthy elite upstairs, Ethan had received a visitor at their small apartment, a man in an expensive suit who spoke in soft, reasonable tones about alternative financing options for people in difficult situations. A man who left behind a business card with a number, but no company name. A man who promised quick cash with flexible repayment terms. Ethan had hidden the card before Sarah came home, determined not to add to his sister's burdens. He would handle this himself. After all, the doctor had told him privately what Sarah didn't know, that without this next procedure, his condition would continue to deteriorate rapidly. As Sarah walked home along the waterfront, the summer night air heavy with salt and jasmine, she allowed herself a rare moment of weakness. Leaning against the railing overlooking the harbor, she watched the lights of the million-dollar yachts bobbing gently on the water. How different her life might have been if her parents hadn't taken that fateful sailing trip 5 years ago. If she'd insisted they wait until the weather cleared. If she had gone with them instead of staying behind to care for Ethan during a particularly bad episode. "Ms. Mitchell?" The voice startled her. She turned to find Marcus standing a few feet away, his usual haughty expression replaced by something closer to concern. "Sorry to disturb you," he said, his accent clipping the words precisely. "You left your medication in your locker." He extended his hand, holding the small orange bottle of anxiety, pills she occasionally needed to get through the most stressful shifts. "Thank you," she said, taking the bottle and slipping it into her bag. "I didn't realize I'd forgotten it." "Mr. Blackwood noticed you seemed distressed during your shift tonight," Marcus continued, looking uncomfortable. "He asked me to check if everything was all right." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Mr. Blackwood noticed me?" Marcus nodded. "He notices everything, Ms. Mitchell, particularly his best employees." Before she could respond, Marcus handed her an envelope. "He also asked me to give you this. Good night." Sarah stood frozen, watching Marcus walk away, the envelope heavy in her hand. Inside was a note written on heavy cream stationery, the handwriting precise and angular. "Your performance has been exemplary, but tonight you seemed troubled. If there's anything the Meridian can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to ask. GB." Below the message was a phone number. Sarah stared at the note, uncomprehending. In 2 years, Gabriel Blackwood had never spoken to her, never acknowledged her existence beyond the standard employee contract. Why now? Why tonight? Had she made some mistake during service that had caught his attention? She shoved the note into her bag alongside the pill bottle and continued her walk home, unaware that she was being watched from the tinted windows of a black Tesla parked across the street. When she arrived home, the apartment was dark except for the glow of Ethan's laptop. He had fallen asleep on the couch, his research papers scattered around him, the soft whir of his oxygen concentrator creating a familiar white noise. Sarah covered him with a blanket, checked his medication schedule, and quietly moved to her own room. As she changed out of her work clothes, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Sarah Mitchell." A male voice, unfamiliar and cold. "Yes, who is this?" "We have something that belongs to your brother. He'll want it back." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? Who is this?" "Check your email. You have 48 hours. The line went dead. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened her email. There was a new message from an anonymous sender. The subject line read simply, 48 hours. When she opened it, she found photos of Ethan entering their apartment building, screenshots of his medical records, copies of loan applications in his name that she had never seen before, and a final image of a handwritten note that made her sink to her knees. $75,000 by Friday midnight. The clock is ticking. Sarah looked at her sleeping brother through the doorway, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath, and felt her world collapse around her. In that moment, she knew she would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect him. Even if it meant asking for help from the last person she ever expected to turn to. Even if it meant making a deal with Gabriel Blackwood. The morning came too quickly for Sarah. She had spent most of the night pacing her small apartment, calculating and recalculating their finances, making desperate calls to banks that predictably denied her loan applications. By dawn, the harsh reality was inescapable. There was no way to gather $75,000 in 48 hours through conventional means. "You look terrible," Ethan said, eyeing her with concern as she poured her third cup of coffee. "Bad shift last night." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired. How are you feeling today?" "Same as always," he shrugged, the gesture making him wince slightly. What he didn't say, what he never said, was that same as always meant constant pain, fatigue, and the quiet fear that came with knowing your heart could fail at any moment. "I picked up an extra shift today," Sarah lied, watching as Ethan swallowed his morning pills. "So I'll be home late." "You work too much, Sarah," he said, using his childhood nickname for her. "I've been thinking, maybe I should defer next semester. Get a job instead, help out more." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly. "Your education comes first, that's what Mom and Dad would have wanted. The mention of their parents hung in the air between them, a shared wound that never fully healed. Sarah squeezed Ethan's shoulder as she passed, hiding the tremor in her hand. "I've got to run. Take it easy today, okay?" Instead of heading to the Meridian, Sarah walked to the public library, where she spent 2 hours researching Gabriel Blackwood. The information was sparse. He appeared in a few business publications as a tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist, was photographed occasionally at high-profile charity events, always alone, never smiling. No personal details, no scandals, no social media presence. It was as if he deliberately maintained a low profile despite his wealth and position. At noon, Sarah finally gathered her courage and dialed the number from the note. "Blackwood," a voice answered on the first ring. Sarah's throat went dry. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Sarah Mitchell from the Meridian." A pause. "Ms. Mitchell, I was hoping you would call. I need to speak with you. It's important." "I see." His voice revealed nothing. "I'm at the restaurant now. The private dining. Room on the top floor is available in 30 minutes. Before she could respond, the line went dead. The Meridian looked different in daylight, less imposing, more exposed. Sarah entered through the employee entrance, nodding to the few staff members preparing for the lunch service. No one questioned her presence. They simply averted their eyes, as if sensing something significant was unfolding. Marcus was waiting, by the elevator to the top floor, his expression unreadable. "He's expecting you," was all he said as he swiped a key card and the doors slid open. The private dining room overlooked the entire harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the view. Like a living painting, Gabriel Blackwood stood with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him, observing the water below. He was taller than Sarah remembered, his posture rigid and controlled. When he turned to face her, she was struck by the intensity of his dark eyes that seemed to assess and calculate everything they touched. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, gesturing to a chair at the table. "Please sit." Sarah remained standing. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Your message suggested urgency." He tilted his head slightly. "I assume this isn't about your work schedule." "No," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's about my brother." For the next 10 minutes, Sarah spoke without interruption, laying out the situation with Ethan, the threatening email, the loan, the deadline. She omitted nothing, sensing that partial truths would not serve her here. Throughout her explanation, Blackwood's expression remained unchanged, a study in controlled neutrality. When she finished, he walked to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water, offering one to Sarah. "So, you need $75,000 within." He checked. His watch, approximately 36 hours. "Yes," Sarah said, accepting the water but not drinking. "I wouldn't ask if there were any other option. And yet you've come to me, a man you've barely spoken to in 2 years of employment." Blackwood took a seat, motioning again for Sarah to do the same. This time she complied. "Why?" The question hung between them, deceptively simple yet loaded with implications. "Because you can help," Sarah said finally. "And because you offered." A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossed his features. "Direct, I appreciate that." He leaned forward, his fingers steepled together. "I can solve your problem, Miss Mitchell. Not just the immediate threat, but the underlying issues as well. Your brother's medical bills, his education, your financial situation." Sarah's heart raced. "Why would you do that?" "I have my reasons," he replied, his tone making it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "But there would be conditions." Of course there would be. Nothing came without a price, especially from men like Gabriel Blackwood. "What conditions?" Sarah asked, her mouth suddenly dry. Blackwood rose and walked to the window again, his reflection superimposed over the harbor view. 30 days. You would come to stay at my estate for 30 days. No outside contact, no phone, no visitors. Following my schedule, my rules." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're asking me to be your—" "I'm asking for your time, Ms. Mitchell," he interrupted, his voice sharp but controlled. "Nothing more, nothing less. You will have your own accommodations. You will not be harmed or touched in any way. He turned to face her. I simply require your presence and cooperation for 30 days. Why? Sarah demanded. What possible reason could you have for such an arrangement? My reasons are my own, he replied, but I can assure you they are not what you're imagining. Sarah paced the room, her mind racing. The proposition was invasive, bizarre, almost cruel in its mystery. And yet, what choice did she have? Ethan's safety, his life, hung in the balance. I agree, she said slowly. I want guarantees, written documentation that you'll pay the debt, medical coverage for Ethan's treatments, and I want to speak to him before I go to explain my absence. The financial arrangements can be documented and executed immediately, Blackwood said. As for speaking with your brother, you may call him today, but you cannot reveal the nature of our arrangement. You will tell him you've been offered a special assignment, a private chef position for a client who requires total confidentiality. He paused. I understand your brother's education focuses on culinary arts. He'll find it believable. Sarah felt a chill at how much Blackwood already knew about her life. And what happens after the 30 days? You return to your life, significantly more financially secure, he said simply. Your brother receives the care he needs. You continue your employment at the Meridian if you wish, or pursue other opportunities. And if I refuse? Blackwood's expression didn't change. Then you leave this room exactly as you entered it. I don't deal in threats, Ms. Mitchell. This is simply an offer. Sarah looked out at the harbor, at the same waters that had claimed her parents, at the city that held her brother, at the life that had become a constant struggle for survival. 30 days. A month of her life in exchange for Ethan's future. His safety. I need to think, she said. You have 1 hour, Blackwood replied, checking his watch again. I'll be in my office downstairs. Marcus will show you out when you're ready. As he reached the door, Sarah called after him. Mr. Blackwood, if I agree, when would this arrangement begin? He paused without turning. Tonight? The situation with your brother's creditors requires immediate action. After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of the decision crushing down on her. She pulled out her phone and stared at the last text from Ethan. Don't worry so much. I'll be fine. Love you, sir. She closed her eyes, remembering their parents, remembering her promise to always protect him. Then she opened the note Blackwood had sent her the night before, studying the precise, controlled handwriting. Whatever he wanted from her, it wasn't simple. Men like Gabriel Blackwood didn't make such unusual propositions without complex motives. Exactly 58 minutes later, Sarah knocked on the door of Blackwood's office. Come in, his voice called from inside. Sarah entered, her decision made, her shoulders set with determination. I accept your conditions, 30 days, no contact, your rules. She swallowed hard. But I want to add one more condition of my own. Blackwood raised an eyebrow, waiting. When this is over, Sarah said, her voice steady, you'll tell me why, the real reason, no matter what it is. For the first time since she'd met him, Gabriel Blackwood smiled, a small, tightly controlled gesture that didn't reach his eyes. Agreed. We have a deal, Ms. Mitchell. That evening, as the sun set over Newport, a black car with tinted windows pulled up outside Sarah's apartment building. She emerged carrying a single suitcase, her face pale but composed. Before stepping into the car, she looked up at the window of their apartment, where Ethan stood watching, confused by her sudden departure, but reassured by her promise that this temporary job would solve their financial problems. The car door closed behind her with a soft final click. Across from her sat Gabriel Blackwood, his face half hidden in shadow, watching her with those calculating dark eyes. There's no going back now, he said softly, as the car pulled away. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I never go back, she replied. Only forward. What she didn't know then, couldn't know, was just how far forward this decision would take her, and how completely it would transform both their lives. The car journey lasted precisely 43 minutes. Sarah counted each one, watching. As the familiar streets of Newport gave way to the exclusive Ocean Drive, then turned onto an unmarked private road that wound through dense forest. The trees eventually parted to reveal a modern mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, a striking structure of glass, steel and stone that seemed to both challenge and complement the rugged landscape around it. "We've arrived," Blackwood said, breaking the silence that had persisted throughout the drive. The car stopped before an imposing gate that opened silently at their approach. As they continued up the curved driveway, Sarah caught glimpses of manicured gardens, a reflecting pool and security cameras disguised as landscape lighting. The entire property radiated calculated precision, beautiful but controlled, much like its owner. The front door opened as they approached, revealing a slender woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her posture was impeccable, her expression inscrutable. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Mrs. Reynolds," Blackwood said as they entered the foyer. "She manages the household. If you need anything practical during your stay, she will assist you." Mrs. Reynolds nodded once, her pale blue eyes assessing Sarah with quiet intensity. "Welcome, Miss Mitchell. I've prepared the East Suite for you." "Thank you," Sarah replied, unsure of the proper protocol in this strange situation. Was she a guest, a prisoner, something in between? "Mrs. Reynolds will show you to your quarters," Blackwood continued. "Dinner is at 8. Until then, please make yourself comfortable." He checked his watch, a gesture Sarah was beginning to recognize as habitual. "I have calls to make regarding your brother's situation. By morning, his creditors will no longer be a concern." With almost that, he disappeared down a hallway, leaving Sarah alone with the housekeeper. "This way, please," Mrs. Reynolds said, already moving toward a curved staircase. The East Suite proved to be larger than Sarah's entire apartment, a spacious bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, connected to a sitting area, a luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub and a walk-in closet, already filled with clothing in her size. The realization that someone had anticipated her measurements sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "How did he know?" "Mr. Blackwood is thorough," Mrs. Reynolds interrupted, her tone making it clear that further questions would not be welcomed. "You'll find everything you need here. Toiletries in the bathroom, casual and formal attire in the closet. If anything doesn't fit properly, let me know." Sarah ran her fingertips over a silk blouse hanging in the closet. "I brought my own clothes." "Yes," Mrs. Reynolds acknowledged with a slight nod toward Sarah's modest suitcase. "But Mr. Blackwood prefers guests to use what he provides during their stay. House policy." The word guests hung in the air. How many others had been in this timization before her, and what had happened to them? "The house has certain rules," Mrs. Reynolds continued, moving to stand by the windows. "Most areas are accessible to you, with exceptions clearly marked by red sensors above the doorways. Those areas are private. The grounds are available for your use from sunrise to sunset, but the gates are secured at all times. There is no cell service here by design, and the Wi-Fi is restricted. So I really am cut off from the outside," Sarah murmured. Mrs. Reynolds's expression softened marginally. "Your brother is being well cared for, Miss Mitchell. That was part of the arrangement, wasn't it?" Before Sarah could respond, the housekeeper moved toward the door. "There's a house phone by the bed if you need assistance. I suggest you rest before dinner. The first night is always an adjustment." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Sarah explored her new surroundings more thoroughly. The bathroom featured heated floors and a rainfall shower with more settings than she could comprehend. The closet contained not only clothing but also shoes, accessories, and even perfumes, all expensive brands she had only seen in magazines. The sitting area held bookshelves filled with carefully curated titles, from classics to contemporary works, many focused on psychology, art, and history. She tried the door to the hallway. It wasn't locked, at least not physically. For the next hour, Sarah wandered the permitted areas of the mansion. Each room revealed a new facet of Gabriel Blackwood. His taste in art leaned toward the abstract and challenging. His library contained thousands of volumes in multiple languages. His music collection spanned centuries, but focused heavily on classical compositions. Yet despite these glimpses into his aesthetic preferences, the man himself remained an enigma. There were no personal photographs, no mementos, nothing that spoke to his life beyond these walls. The house was a beautiful shell, meticulously designed, but strangely impersonal. At precisely 8 o'clock, a soft chime sounded throughout the house. Sarah followed the sound to the dining room, where she found a table set for two, Blackwood already seated at the head. "You're punctual," he noted as she entered. "I appreciate that." Sarah took the seat to his right, noting the expensive china, crystal and silver. "I didn't have much choice. The chime was quite effective." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, well, I value structure." He gestured toward her outfit. She had changed into a simple navy dress from the provided wardrobe. "I see you found everything satisfactory." "The clothes fit perfectly," Sarah acknowledged, "which is both convenient and unsettling." "I'm a detail-oriented person, Ms. Mitchell, in business and in personal matters." A server appeared silently, pouring wine and presenting the first course, a delicate seafood appetizer that under normal circumstances would have delighted Sarah. Tonight, however, her appetite was suppressed by anxiety and uncertainty. "You haven't asked about your brother," Blackwood observed after the server departed. Sarah set down her fork. "I assumed you would tell me when there was something to tell." "The debt has been paid," he said, taking a sip of wine. "The creditors have been informed that any further contact with Ethan Mitchell will have severe consequences. They've agreed to destroy all records of the loan." Relief washed over Sarah, momentarily overwhelming her suspicion. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Blackwood replied. "Our arrangement is just beginning." Throughout dinner, Blackwood maintained a surface-level conversation about the food, the wine, the architecture of the house, safe topics that revealed nothing of substance. Sarah played along, answering his occasional questions about her culinary knowledge and preferences, while attempting to redirect the conversation to more personal matters. "Why the restaurant business?" she asked as dessert was served. "With your background in technology, it seems an unusual choice." Blackwood considered the question. "I find restaurants fascinating, controlled environments where countless variables converge. Staff, ingredients, customers, ambiance. When orchestrated correctly, they create something greater than the sum of their parts." He paused. "Also, everyone needs to eat, even billionaires." This last comment, delivered with the faintest hint of self-deprecation, was the first crack in his polished veneer that Sarah had observed. After dinner, Blackwood led her to a room she hadn't discovered during her earlier exploration, a conservatory filled with rare orchids, the air humid and fragrant. A glass ceiling revealed the night sky above, stars visible in a way they never were from her apartment in town. "This is beautiful," Sarah admitted, genuinely impressed by the collection of exotic blooms. "Beauty that requires precise conditions to thrive," Blackwood said, adjusting the position of a nearby plant. "Too much or too little of anything, water, light, nutrients, and they wither." He looked at her directly. "I've found that most valuable things in life require similar attention. To detail. Is that what I am? A valuable thing requiring precise conditions?" The question hung between them, more confrontational than Sarah had intended, but impossible to retract. "You're here because I believe you possess something rare," Blackwood said finally. "Something I want to understand better." "And what's that?" "Resilience." He moved closer, studying her with those intense dark eyes. "I've observed how you've handled adversity, Ms. Mitchell. Your parents' accident, your brother's illness, the financial burden. Most people would have collapsed under such pressure, but you adapted, you survived, you thrived in your way." He reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. "I find that fascinating." Sarah stepped back, unsettled by his assessment. "So I'm what? A specimen to be studied, a psychological experiment?" "Not an experiment," Blackwood corrected. "A puzzle I want to solve." "And when you've solved it, what then?" He didn't answer directly. "It's getting late. Tomorrow we begin. In earnest. 7 a.m., breakfast in the morning room. We'll discuss the schedule then." He gestured toward the door. "Can you find your way back to your suite, or shall I escort you?" "I can manage," Sarah said. eager for solitude to process the strange conversation. As she reached the doorway, Blackwood called after her. "One more thing, Ms. Mitchell." She turned back. "Your brother's first treatment session is scheduled for Wednesday at Boston Memorial, the best cardiac specialist on the East Coast. I've arranged for a car to bring him there and back." Sarah felt tears threatening. This, Ethan's health, was why she was here. Whatever bizarre psychological game Blackwood was playing, it was giving her brother a chance he wouldn't have had otherwise. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly. Back in her suite, Sarah found an envelope on her pillow. Inside was a printed schedule for the next day, detailed down to 15-minute increments: exercise, breakfast, assessment session, lunch, structured observation, free time, monitored, dinner, reflection period, sleep. Below the schedule was a handwritten note in Blackwood's precise script. "The next 30 days will challenge you in ways you cannot anticipate. Some will seem arbitrary, even cruel. Trust that each has purpose. GB." Sarah placed the note on the nightstand and moved to the windows overlooking the dark ocean below. Somewhere out there was Newport. Was Ethan? Was the life she had temporarily surrendered? 30 days. She could endure anything for 30 days. As she prepared for bed, Sarah didn't notice the small red light blinking from the decorative air vent near the ceiling, one of dozens of monitoring devices throughout the mansion, recording every movement, every expression, every word. In his study, Gabriel Blackwood watched the multiple screens displaying different areas of the house, his attention focused on the feed from the East Suite. He observed as Sarah discovered the hidden cameras, her expression shifting from shock to anger to resignation. He watched as she systematically covered each one she could find with articles of clothing or strategically moved furniture. And for the first time in a very long time, Gabriel Blackwood smiled genuinely. "Interesting," he murmured to himself. "Very interesting indeed." The game had begun. Days at the Glass mansion followed a rigid pattern. Each morning, Sarah woke to find a new schedule on her nightstand, each one slightly different from the day before, but always structured around what Blackwood called assessment sessions. These took place in a minimalist office with one wall entirely of glass overlooking the ocean, the other walls lined with books and unusual artwork that Sarah came to realize were psychological in nature, optical illusions, emotional triggers, subconscious prompts. During these sessions, Blackwood asked questions that probed deeper than any conversation Sarah had ever experienced. Some were straightforward about her childhood, her parents, her relationship with Ethan. Others were hypothetical moral dilemmas that left her wrestling with impossible choices. Still, others seemed designed to provoke emotional responses. Anger, grief, fear. "Describe your mother's hands," he said on the fourth day. "And why?" Sarah asked, already exhausted from an hour of questioning. "Because I asked you to," Blackwood replied evenly. "Our arrangement requires your cooperation, not your understanding." Sarah closed her eyes, conjuring the memory. They were small, but strong. Short nails, always practical. A thin silver ring on her right index finger, her grandmother's. A small scar between her thumb and forefinger from a sailing accident. They smelled like the lavender lotion she used every night. When she opened her eyes, Blackwood was writing in a leather-bound notebook. "Very good. Now tell me about the day she died, but only using sensory details. What you saw, heard, smelled, touched, tasted." "No," Sarah said firmly. "That's off limits." Blackwood set down his pen. "Nothing is off limits here, Ms. Mitchell. That was made clear from the beginning. You said I wouldn't be harmed. This is harmful." "Discomfort is not harm," he countered. "Growth requires pushing boundaries. What possible growth comes from forcing me to relive the worst day of my life?" Blackwood leaned forward, his dark eyes intent. "Understanding of yourself, of resilience, of how trauma shapes us." He paused. "You don't have to answer now. We'll return to it tomorrow." But they didn't return to it the next day or the day after. Instead, Blackwood shifted to new topics, new approaches, always probing, always watching her reactions with that calculating gaze. By the end of the first week, Sarah had developed strategies for maintaining emotional distance during these sessions. She answered honestly but briefly. She controlled her expressions, her body language. She revealed facts without exposing feelings. "You're adapting," Blackwood observed on the 8th day. "Creating protective barriers. Interesting." "Isn't that what you would do?" Sarah challenged. "If someone was dissecting your psyche daily?" Flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face. "Yes," he admitted, "it is exactly what I would do." It was the first personal revelation he had offered, small but significant. Outside the assessment sessions, Sarah's days were filled with structured activities: swimming in the indoor pool, guided meditation, art therapy sessions with materials that appeared mysteriously in her suite. Each evening concluded with dinner with Blackwood, where the conversation gradually shifted from impersonal topics to more substantive discussions about literature, philosophy, and occasionally politics. During her designated free time, Sarah explored every accessible inch of the mansion and its grounds, looking for clues about Blackwood, about previous guests, about the true purpose behind her stay. Most doors opened to her touch, revealing beautifully appointed rooms that told her nothing. But the red sensors marked forbidden territory that remained tantalizingly out of reach. On the 12th day, Sarah received her first communication about Ethan, a medical report forwarded by Blackwood showing successful completion of his first major treatment. The clinical language described significant improvement in cardiac function. At the bottom was a handwritten note from her brother. "Don't worry about me, Sar. The new doctors are amazing. Focus on your work. Miss you." Sarah traced the words with her fingertip, tears blurring her vision. When she looked up, Blackwood was watching her from the doorway of the library where she'd been reading. "He's doing well," Blackwood said. "His prognosis has improved considerably." "Thank you," Sarah said, wiping away tears. "I mean it. Whatever else is happening here, thank you for helping him." Blackwood nodded once, then hesitated. "Would you like to walk on the beach? The tide is low." It was the first spontaneous suggestion he'd made, the first deviation from the rigid schedules that governed their days. The beach was accessible only by a private staircase cut into the cliff face. As they descended, Sarah noted how the mansion seemed to disappear from certain angles, becoming invisible against the sky. A fortress, hidden in plain sight. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the crashing waves and calling seagulls. Blackwood had removed his shoes, rolling up the cuffs of his expensive trousers, a small concession to informality that humanized him slightly. "Why do you live alone in such a large house?" Sarah finally asked. Blackwood continued walking, eyes on the horizon. "Who says I live alone? Don't you?" "Most of the time, yes." He bent to examine a piece of sea glass, then straightened. "It suits me. No family, no relationships." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "I had a family. Once." The simple statement contained volumes of unspoken history, and Sarah sensed this was as much personal information as he'd voluntarily shared with anyone in a long time. "What happened to them?" she pressed gently. Blackwood's expression closed, like a door slamming shut. "Your free time ends in 10 minutes. We should return to the house." The moment of connection, if that's what it had been, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah decided to test the boundaries of her gilded cage. She slipped out of her suite and padded silently through the darkened house, avoiding the security sensors she'd mapped during her daytime explorations. The stillness was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the cliff. Most of the forbidden areas were locked after hours, but one door with a red sensor had been left slightly ajar, Blackwood's private office adjacent to his study. Sarah hesitated, weighing the risk against her growing need to understand the man who had orchestrated this bizarre arrangement. Inside, the office was clinically organized, files arranged by some system she couldn't immediately discern. Technology that looked more advanced than anything commercially available, and a wall of monitors, currently dark. On the desk sat a single leather-bound folder with her name on it. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents dating back years, her college transcripts, medical records, employment history, even childhood school reports. More disturbing were surveillance photos. Sarah walking to work, Sarah shopping for groceries, Sarah sitting at her parents' grave. The final page was a psychological assessment written in clinical language. Subject demonstrates exceptional adaptive capacity under sustained stress. Emotional regulation well developed but with specific vulnerabilities centered around family attachments. Protective instincts hyper-developed. Potential candidate for... The rest of the page had been removed. Finding what you're looking for? Sarah. Spun around to find Mrs. Reynolds standing in the doorway, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, making her look somehow younger and more formidable simultaneously. "How long has he been watching me?" Sarah demanded, holding up the folder. "Years before my parents died? Why?" Mrs. Reynolds stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "You're not the first, you know, but you are the only one who's made it this far. What does that mean? What happens to the others?" "They leave," the housekeeper said simply. "They can't handle the pressure, the isolation, the constant observation. They break. And is that what he wants, to break me?" Mrs. Reynolds studied her for a long moment. "No, Miss Mitchell, I believe he wants the opposite." Before Sarah could question her further, a security alarm began to sound throughout the house, a piercing, rhythmic wail. Mrs. Reynolds's expression shifted to alarm. "You need to return to your room now. Mr. Blackwood does not tolerate breaches of privacy." "I want answers," Sarah insisted. "And you'll get none if you're sent away tonight," Mrs. Reynolds countered, already moving toward the door. "Go. I'll say I was doing a security check and triggered the system accidentally." Sarah hesitated, then slipped the psychological assessment into her robe pocket before hurrying back to her suite through the now illuminated hallways. She had just closed her door when she heard footsteps approaching, Blackwood's distinctive measured stride. He knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of tension. The security system was triggered. Sarah forced her breathing to steady. "I'm fine. The alarm woke me." "What happened?" Blackwood studied her face intently. "A misunderstanding." Apparently. Mrs. Reynolds was checking the perimeter sensors. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "At this hour?" "She's thorough," he replied, "much like myself." The air between them crackled with unspoken accusations and suspicions. Sarah was certain he knew she'd been in his office, just as she was. Certain he wouldn't directly confront her about it. "Since we're both awake," Blackwood said after a moment, "perhaps we should use the time productively. Meet me in the assessment room in 15 minutes. It wasn't a request. The assessment that followed was the most intense yet, questions designed to provoke, to destabilize, to expose. Blackwood pushed harder than ever before, targeting the vulnerabilities he'd documented so meticulously in that folder. "Tell me about the day your parents died," he demanded again. This time, exhausted and rattled by her discovery, Sarah couldn't maintain her usual defenses. "I was at the hospital with Ethan," she began, her voice hollow. "He'd had an episode the night before. My parents were supposed to cancel their sailing trip, but I told them to go, insisted actually. The weather forecast changed after they left. The storm came in faster than anyone predicted." Her hands began to shake. "I was sitting by Ethan's bed when the Coast Guard called. They found the boat capsized. No survivors." Blackwood wrote nothing in his notebook this time. He simply watched her with an intensity that made Sarah feel exposed to her core. "What did you do next?" he asked quietly. "I didn't tell Ethan. Not right away. I smiled and held his hand and pretended everything was fine until he was stable enough to hear it. The memory burned. I made funeral arrangements between his treatments. I met with lawyers while he slept. I signed papers giving me guardianship. I sold our family home to pay medical bills. And you never broke down, never showed him your grief?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "What good would that have done? He needed strength, not another burden." "And what did you need, Sarah?" The use of her first name, the first time he'd done so, broke something open inside her. "What I needed didn't matter," she whispered. It still doesn't. Blackwood leaned forward. It matters to me. The simple statement, delivered with unexpected gentleness, was the final blow to Sarah's carefully constructed walls. Tears came, then sobs, deep, wrenching cries that seemed torn from some hidden place she'd sealed away years ago. Through her tears, she saw Blackwood watching, not with clinical detachment now, but with something like recognition, as if her pain was a language he understood intimately. When the storm of emotion finally passed, leaving Sarah hollow and spent, Blackwood handed her a glass of water. "This is why you're here," he said quietly. "This moment, this honesty." "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice raw. "What do you want from me?" "Not from you," he corrected. "For you." He stood and moved to the window, his back to her. "The assessment is concluded for tonight. Get some rest, Sarah. Tomorrow will be different." Back in her suite, Sarah found a small box on her pillow. Inside was a cell phone with a single program number. When she pressed dial, Ethan answered on the first ring. "Sir, is that really you?" The sound of his voice, stronger than she'd heard in years, broke her heart open all over again. "It's me," she managed. "How are you feeling?" "Amazing. The new treatment is working better than anyone expected. The doctors say my heart function has improved by 30% already." His excitement was palpable. "How's the private chef? Gig? Are they treating you well?" Sarah looked around at the luxurious prison that had somehow become the site of her unraveling and rebuilding. "It's intense but educational," she hesitated. "Ethan, I need to know, are you really okay? You're not just saying that to make me feel better?" "I promise, sir, I feel better than I have in years." He paused. "Actually, I have news. Dr. Winters says I might be a candidate for a new procedure, something experimental but with incredible results. They're running tests now to see if I qualify." After saying goodbye, Sarah sat holding the phone, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Gratitude toward Blackwood for helping Ethan, violation at the years of surveillance, anger at being manipulated, relief at finally expressing her long-buried grief, and underneath it all, a growing, uncomfortable awareness that whatever game Blackwood was playing, she had become a willing participant. The next morning, no schedule awaited her. Instead, Mrs. Reynolds informed her that Mr. Blackwood had been called away on business and would return the following day. "You have free run of the house today," the housekeeper said, handing Sarah a key card. "All areas are accessible. Mr. Blackwood suggested you might want to satisfy your curiosity." It was a test, Sarah realized, a calculated risk on Blackwood's part, offering transparency while observing how she would use this newfound freedom. Sarah spent the day methodically exploring the previously forbidden areas of the mansion. Most contained nothing particularly revealing: additional guest suites, a home theater, a fully equipped medical room. But in Blackwood's private quarters, she found something unexpected: a framed photograph on his bedside table showing a much younger Gabriel with a woman and small boy, all three smiling in a way that transformed Blackwood's usually stern features. A family he'd once had, a life before this one. The discovery of the photograph altered everything. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about it, the evidence of Blackwood's humanity, of a life that existed before the controlled emptiness of the glass mansion. She found herself studying his features in the image, noting how profoundly different he looked, with genuine happiness softening his expression. The woman beside him was beautiful in an understated way, her hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. They looked whole, content, nothing like the calculating, isolated man she'd come to know. When Blackwood returned the following day, Sarah sensed a subtle shift in his demeanor. He was still formal, still controlled, but something had changed, as if he understood that by giving her access to his private spaces, he had surrendered something fundamental between them. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked as they walked through the gardens that afternoon, the scheduled assessment session abandoned without explanation. "I found more questions," Sarah replied honestly. "Who were they?" "The woman and boy in the photograph." Blackwood continued, walking, his pace measured. "My wife Eleanor, our son James." His voice remained steady, but Sarah caught the slight tightening of his jaw. They died 12 years ago. Car accident. Black ice on a mountain road in Switzerland. The simple statement, delivered without emotion, struck Sarah with its devastating parallel to her own loss. "I'm sorry." "As am I." He stopped beside a stone bench overlooking the cliffs. Eleanor was a behavioral psychologist, brilliant, insightful. She specialized in trauma and resilience. Her work focused on identifying what makes certain people able to withstand devastating circumstances that destroy others. Understanding began to dawn. That's what all this is about, your wife's research. Blackwood sat on the bench, gesturing for Sarah to join him. "After they died, I found her research notes, case studies, theoretical frameworks, unfinished manuscripts. She had been developing a system for identifying and cultivating resilience in trauma survivors." His hands clasped together tightly. "I decided to continue her work. By experimenting on people? On me? By creating controlled environments where resilience could be studied and potentially enhanced." He met her gaze directly. "You were not randomly selected, Sarah. Your profile matched Eleanor's criteria perfectly, someone who had experienced profound loss but continued to function at a high level, who placed others' needs before your own to an exceptional degree, who demonstrated remarkable adaptive capacity. So the surveillance, the assessments, the psychological pressure, it was all to see if I would break or to make me stronger." Sarah struggled to contain her conflicting emotions, violation competing with understanding. "Both," Blackwood admitted. "The process reveals vulnerabilities, then provides opportunities to address them. What happened last night, your emotional breakthrough, was a critical juncture. You accessed grief you've been suppressing for years. That doesn't give you the right to manipulate people's lives, to play God with their emotions," Sarah said, anger rising within her. "How many others have you done this to?" "7, he replied without hesitation. "Over the past decade, all compensated generously, all informed of the basic parameters, as you were." "And how many of these experiments have been successful?" A shadow crossed his face. "None until now. Most subjects withdrew before completing the program. 2 experienced psychological decompensation requiring intervention. And you just kept going, despite the harm you were causing. I modified the protocols each time, refined the approach." He looked out toward the horizon. Eleanor believed this work could help people recover from trauma, could teach resilience as a skill, rather than leaving it to chance. "I couldn't abandon that vision." The realization struck Sarah with sudden clarity. This isn't about continuing her research. It's about proving she was right, that her work mattered. Blackwood was silent for a long moment. "Perhaps," he finally conceded. "What happened to your son?" Sarah asked gently. "James died instantly. Eleanor survived for 3 days." His voice remained steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "I was in Tokyo on business. By the time I reached the hospital, she was unconscious. I never got to say goodbye." The admission, simple, devastating, revealed more about Gabriel Blackwood than all the previous weeks combined. This controlled, calculating man had built his entire existence around an absence, around words never spoken, around guilt that had never healed. "And this is how you've lived since then? Alone in this glass fortress, studying people's pain?" "This is how I've survived," he corrected. "The only way I know how." The parallels between them were suddenly stark. 2 people who had channeled grief into rigid control, who had built walls to contain their pain, who had denied themselves vulnerability in service of a greater purpose. But while Sarah had done it for Ethan, Blackwood had done it for a ghost. "What happens when our 30 days are over?" Sarah asked. "You compile your data, write your paper, move on to the next subject?" "The program concludes. Your financial situation remains resolved. Your brother continues receiving medical care. You return to your life." He hesitated. "Unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless you choose to stay involved with the research. As a partner, not a subject. Your insights would be valuable." The offer hung between them, unexpected and complex. Before Sarah could respond, her phone, the one Blackwood had given her to call Ethan, rang from her pocket. "It's the hospital," she said, checking the screen. "Ethan's doctor." Blackwood nodded for her to take the call. Dr. Winter's voice was measured but optimistic. "Miss Mitchell, I wanted to update you personally. Your brother has been approved for the experimental procedure we discussed. His test results are extremely promising. If you consent, we can schedule the surgery for next week." After ending the call, Sarah sat in stunned silence. "Good news?" Blackwood asked. "They want to do a new procedure, something cutting-edge that could permanently repair his heart defect." She looked at Blackwood suspiciously. "Did you arrange this too? Pull strings to get him into an experimental program?" "I made his case file available to specialists who might otherwise never have seen it," Blackwood acknowledged. "But his acceptance into the program is based solely on medical criteria. He's a good candidate because of his specific condition and his response to preliminary treatments." Sarah stood abruptly. "I need to see him before the surgery." "Of course, I'll arrange transportation for tomorrow." "No," Sarah insisted. "I need to leave tonight, now." Something in her tone made Blackwood study her face carefully. "You're not planning to return, are you?" The question was direct, without accusation. Sarah considered lying, then decided against it. "I don't know." He nodded once as if he'd expected this. "I won't stop you. Our arrangement was always voluntary. You're free to leave at any time." He stood, maintaining a careful distance between them. "But before you go, there's something you should see." In his private office, Blackwood unlocked a drawer and removed a thick manila envelope. "This belongs to you." Inside, Sarah found documents she recognized: her mother's journal that had been lost during the move after selling their family, home childhood drawings Ethan had made for her that she thought were gone forever, photographs from family vacations she'd never seen. "How did you get these?" she whispered. "I have resources," Blackwood said simply. "When I began observing you, I wanted to understand your background fully. These items appeared in various places over the years: storage auctions, estate sales, online marketplaces. I collected them. Why?" "Initially for research purposes. Later," he hesitated, "later, I thought you might want them back someday." The gesture was both invasive and profoundly thoughtful, emblematic of the contradictions that defined Gabriel Blackwood. Sarah didn't know whether to thank him or condemn him. "There's a car waiting whenever you're ready," he said, moving toward the door. "Mrs. Reynolds has prepared a bag with your personal items. Your financial arrangements remain unchanged, regardless of your decision to leave early." "Gabriel," Sarah called as he reached the doorway, the first time she had used his first name. "What happened to your wife's research after she died? The manuscripts? The notes?" He paused without turning. "I completed it, published under her name in academic journals. It was well received in theoretical circles, but without practical applications or clinical trials, it remained just a hypothesis." "Until me," Sarah realized. "I'm your clinical trial." "You're much more than that," he said softly, and left. 2 hours later, Sarah was in a car heading back to Newport, the envelope of recovered memories on her lap, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. The driver maintained a respectful silence, never asking why they were leaving in the middle of the night or when they might return. In the days that followed, Sarah immersed herself in Ethan's care. The surgery was scheduled, specialists consulted, paperwork completed. Throughout it all, she found herself functioning with a clarity and emotional balance she hadn't experienced before, as if something fundamental had shifted during her time at the Glass Mansion. The night before Ethan's procedure, she sat beside his hospital bed watching him sleep. The monitors showed strong, vital signs, the best they'd been in years. Whatever else Gabriel Blackwood had done, he had given Ethan this chance. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thinking of you both tomorrow, GB." Sarah stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Part of her wanted to delete it, to sever the strange connection that had formed between them. Another part recognized that whatever had happened in that house on the cliff had changed her irrevocably. The surgery was a success. Ethan's recovery exceeded all expectations, his color improving, his energy returning, his future suddenly expansive, with possibilities that had seemed impossible just months earlier. "It's like a miracle," he told Sarah one afternoon as they walked along the harbor, his pace strong and steady. "The doctors can't believe how well it worked." Sarah watched the yachts bobbing in the marina, thinking of the strange journey that had led to this moment. "Not a miracle," she said. "Just someone who had the means to help and chose to use them." "Your mysterious employer," Ethan said, his tone curious. "You never talk about him." "It's complicated," Sarah replied. "Well, I'd like to thank him someday," Ethan continued, "for whatever he did that made all this possible." Sarah nodded, saying nothing. She hadn't returned to the Meridian, using the generous compensation from Blackwood to take time off and consider her next steps. The 30 days had passed. The arrangement was technically complete, yet something felt unfinished. 3 weeks. After Ethan's surgery, Sarah received a package by courier. Inside was a manuscript titled "Resilience After Trauma Clinical Applications" by Eleanor Blackwood, Ph.D., with a note paper-clipped to the cover. "Eleanor's work is finally complete. Your contribution made this possible. The clinical trials begin next month at 3 major research hospitals, voluntary participants fully informed, ethically structured. I thought you might want to see it before publication. GB." Sarah read the manuscript over the course of a day, recognizing elements of her own experience throughout, though her name had been changed, her privacy protected. The methodology had been transformed, the manipulative aspects removed, the process redesigned to empower rather than control. It was no longer an experiment, but a genuine therapeutic protocol. At the end of the manuscript was a handwritten note. "The Foundation needs someone to oversee the ethics committee for the clinical trials. Someone with first-hand experience of the process who understands both its potential and its dangers. The position is yours if you want it. No strings attached. GB." Sarah set the manuscript aside and walked to the window of her apartment, looking out at the harbor. Night was falling, lights beginning to twinkle on the water. Somewhere beyond those lights was a glass mansion on a cliff, and a man who had built a fortress around his grief. She picked up her phone and dialed the number she had memorized but never used. "Blackwood," he answered on the first ring, just as he had months ago when this strange journey began. "The Ethics Committee," Sarah said without preamble. "I'll do it, but on my terms. No surveillance, no manipulation, complete transparency." A pause. "Agreed. And I want to discuss expanding the Foundation's work to include practical support for caregivers of chronic illness patients, financial assistance, respite care, counseling. I'll have legal draw up a proposal," he replied, and she could hear the faint smile in his voice. "One more condition," Sarah added. "Dinner, tonight, a normal restaurant. 2 people having a conversation, not an assessment, not an experiment. Just dinner." This time the pause was longer. "I'd like that," he finally said. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the balcony of a renovated Victorian in downtown Newport, watching as movers carried the last of her and Ethan's belongings inside. The house, purchased with her salary as the new executive director of the Blackwood Resilience Foundation, was walking distance from Rhode Island School of Design, where Ethan had enrolled in the culinary arts program. Her phone rang. Gabriel, calling from London, where he was meeting with international hospital partners. "How's the move going?" he asked, his voice warm in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "Almost done," Sarah replied, watching a moving truck pull away. "The glass mansion sold, by the way. Your realtor called this morning." "Good. It was time for someone else to fill that space." There was a lightness in his tone that had been absent when they first met. "Did you find the package I left in the study?" Sarah smiled, touching the small box in her pocket. "Not yet, but I will." "Call me when you do," he said softly. "I'll be waiting." After they hung up, Sarah entered the study of her new home. On the desk sat a small blue box with a cream envelope propped against it. Inside the envelope was a note written in Gabriel's precise hand. What exists between us cannot be controlled, only protected. If you're ready, I am too. In the box was a simple platinum ring, elegant and understated. Sarah slipped it onto her finger, its weight unfamiliar but somehow right. Then she took out her phone and called the number. That had once represented a bargain, but now meant something entirely different. As she waited for Gabriel to answer, Sarah looked at the photographs now lining her study walls. Her parents smiling on their sailboat, Ethan in his chef's uniform, Gabriel and Sarah at the foundation's opening gala. A life rebuilt from fragments, stronger at the broken places. "I found it," she said when he answered, "and yes, I'm ready." Across the ocean, Gabriel Blackwood finally put down the weight he had carried for 12 years and allowed himself to embrace a future neither of them could have imagined when a desperate woman walked into a restaurant owner's office and made an impossible bargain. Some bargains, it turned out, were meant to be broken, and some were meant to transform into something neither party could have predicted, something that looked remarkably like love. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah and Gabriel's journey of healing and transformation has touched your hearts. For more emotionally powerful stories like this one, we've created a special playlist that explores the complexities of human resilience and unexpected connections. You can find it by clicking on the left side of your screen. If this story moved, you please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that dive deep into life's most challenging moments and the beauty that can emerge from them. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. What was your favorite moment in Sarah and Gabriel's story? What other themes would you like